Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? This idea came as a result of just, I was talking with my sister who'll be joining us shortly. She lives in DC, and we were discussing just everything that's happening in the world and the tool that we have in terms of meditation, what we might do to help people. And we figured taking this time in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week, at the beginning of the quarter, to host an event that people could attend live. And as you noted, it is being recorded to also be able to participate later on as well I'll be posting it both on Vimeo and on YouTube for those who want to listen to, what we're discussing today. The idea was just to provide an opportunity for people to take a moment of rest. We've got a lot going on in the world right now. We know that the value of meditation has been increasing in people's awareness over the last few years. And so we figured that it would be a great opportunity to take some time to have people across various traditions come together to meditate for a period of about 20 minutes. In addition to that, and before we have the meditation, the idea is to have a discussion on meditation in general, the various traditions, and have a guest speaker discuss their research. So the idea was to bring people together to discuss meditation, its value, in the hopes of seeding within attendees and those who will see the video and or listen to the audio later in their awareness the value of meditation, and to irrespective of a tradition that one may be allied with, or if one has no tradition in terms of a meditation, that they may then seek out a meditative tradition. Because as we know, the research has shown, matter of fact, I can talk about Elizabeth Blackburn. She received the Nobel Prize for her work with telomeres. And telomeres are unique in that they help with the aging process. And so if our telomeres shorten precipitously, that hastens the aging process where they can be lengthened. And what the research has shown that meditation, on average about 12 minutes per day, particularly in her case with caregivers, find that their telomeres lengthen, which slows down the aging process. So she won a Nobel Prize for that research along with one of her colleagues. And so thinking about that within her talk, it doesn't mention any particular meditation tradition. And for those of you who know, my wife and I serve as the directors of the Transcendental Meditation Program here in Metropolitan Boston. But the beautiful thing about it is everyone can meditate irrespective of a tradition. And those who have no particular tradition can find one with which they deeply resonate and undertake the process. For me and my wife, that just happens to be TM. The beautiful thing about it is, in terms of meditation, it provides a bit of calmness, a bit of clarity, allows our brains to get some rest, our physiologies to get some rest. And we thought in taking some time today to have this experience, there could be some benefit, not just for the short term, but most importantly for the long term. So that's one of the reasons why we chose to do this and have everyone come through, because we thought it'd be great. It's a harebrained idea that my sister and I came up with one day. You know how if you have siblings, and I'm the eldest and she's the youngest, so if you have siblings, you know how that goes. And
Yep.
she's the only girl of the family. And we were talking about it, and just she says, what the world needs now, International Meditation Hour. And so it was like, okay, let's do this. And here we are after a series of, you know, designing the website and a bunch of other stuff. Dr. Keshavan, thank you for joining us. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine, Dr. Keshavan. Wonderful. And how was your class today?
Good, good. Yeah, just finished. So yeah, it was good.
I'm glad to have you here. Thank you for agreeing to serve as our guest speaker today. And so, what I'll do is the idea behind this, and you may have noted this, is to have about 17, 18 minutes of discussion. And our special guest today is Dr. Matcheri Keshavan, Stanley R. Cobb professor and academic head of psychology at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center and Massachusetts Health Center at Harvard Medical School. His work bridges neuroscience, clinical practice, and compassionate care. And he and I had an opportunity to meet some time ago, and I enjoyed talking with him. And he was upon me reaching out to him, kind enough to offer to share his research with those who are in attendance today and those who will see the video at some point in the future and or listen to the audio as well. So without further ado, the floor is yours, Doctor.
Thank you. Can you see and hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so good afternoon, friends, and thank you for the opportunity. It's a joy to be with you in this shared space of reflection and meditation. When we speak of meditation, I like to think of it as a journey through three classic paths from the Bhagavad Gita, which I, almost grew up learning from my childhood onwards. It's like the most sacred text of Hinduism. It's like the Sermon on the Mount in a way, where um, the Lord Krishna, who acts as the charioteer for the warrior Arjuna when he is in a kind of a panic mode with a battle neurosis, not knowing what to do in a crisis war situation. So he gives him three paths for attaining peace. And I won't give you too much jargon, but these are the three paths. Actually, there are four paths: the action path, the knowledge path, and the path of faith, and the path of meditation, the tools for accomplishing the other three paths. So let me take you through a little bit of each of those. And I've written about each of these in separate papers, and I'm happy to share later if needed, if anyone wants it. The action path, karma yoga, they're all called yoga. Yoga is defined in a broad way. It's basically yoga means union or balancing, balancing the mind, body, and the spirit. The karma yoga reminds us that life is action. The real question is, how do we act? Are we driven by ego and desire for outcomes, or can we act with a spirit of service? Meditation helps us back, witness our impulses, and act with clarity and compassion. Dhyana yoga, which is the meditative path, steadies the restless mind. Neuroscience shows that when we sit in silence, the brain's default mode network, we also call it the resting state network, the part of the brain that spins stories about me and mine, quietens down. This network is often overactive when we are engaged in rumination or anxiety. Meditation restores the balance. It also strengthens other regions like the insula, which support empathy and compassion. In this sense, meditation literally reshapes the brain in ways that echo ancient wisdom. Let me go to the next path, which is called the path of knowledge or Jnana Yoga. So, the fundamental question it asks is, who am I? This is the question that philosophers, going back to Plato in the West, and of course the Upanishads in the East, have always asked, who am I? Neuroscience suggests that our sense of the self is in many ways a construction. There are people who argue that the self might be an illusion, stitched together by memory and perception. The Buddha called it the no self or anatma or anatta. Vedanta describes it as an illusion of separateness. Modern science and ancient philosophy, in their own ways, both remind us that the permanent I we cling to may not be real as we imagine. So when we understand that the self may be an illusion, it becomes easier for the first path, that is selfless service. So these two paths, jnana of self-knowledge and karma of selfless service, they go hand in hand with each other. They feed into each other. And then there is the bhakti yoga, the path of faith or devotion. Faith here is not blind belief, but a trusting openness to something larger than ourselves. Whether we call it God, consciousness, or simply the mystery of life. Faith gives us an emotional anchor, reminding us that even when reason falters, we are held in a larger embrace. Why does this matter for daily life? Because so much of our suffering arises from clinging to a narrow sense of self. In psychiatry, we see how disturbances of the self, such as schizophrenia, can fragment a person's experience of reality. Yet, meditation, by softening the grip of the ego and expanding awareness, can integrate and heal. The Sanskrit word for health is swastha. Swa means self, asta means stable. So, swastha health means to be stable in one's self. Meditation, in this sense, is the medicine for the mind. So, whether we approach it through selfless action, stillness, knowledge, or faith, the essence is the same: to see clearly, to act wisely, to live compassionately. So, I will close with a simple message from Thich Nhat Hanh, a Buddhist scholar. Enlightenment is when the wave realizes it is the ocean. Meditation helps us to realize we are not isolated waves, but we are the ocean. And in that recognition lies freedom, peace, and joy. Thank you.
Something to think about in terms of the tradition, the Vedic tradition, my connection with the Vedic tradition, and I'm well aware of your connection, having read many of your articles you shared with me. And I can say that your willingness to share your wisdom today, to discuss action, knowledge, faith, and meditation, it's an opportunity for us to gain a bit of knowledge, gain a bit of insight, and more importantly than gaining the knowledge or the insight is to act. And it's one thing to know what to do, but it's another thing to do the thing. I look at our children all the time and how, granted, they're only 11, 8, 4, and 5 months, but to know what to do and yet choose not to do it. But as adults, we have increased capacity. We have the capacity to know. We have the capacity to do, assuming that we have chosen to undertake the process of fully learning and really becoming our better selves, our higher selves. And it's an opportunity for us as adults to turn our attention within. I often give the example, it's one thing to be successful in life. I then pivot on that, and Jess may be familiar with me saying this. It's one thing to be successful, it's another to be significant. And significant in the sense of cultivating one's inner calmness, inner clarity, and then bringing that with them into their daily lives. But that can only come when we, for want of a better way of saying it, slough off the stuff of life, slough off our socialization within the transcendental meditation parlance to transcend, to go beyond. And as we go beyond all of that, we come to realize at our substrate, we are, as one dear friend of mine at Morehouse School of Medicine says, we are but a pinch of consciousness, a powerful pinch, but a pinch nonetheless. And some of you may be familiar with the model that came out of my dissertation research or after my dissertation research that I call the 7 layers of manifestation, local and non-local consciousness, where we begin with pure consciousness. Pure consciousness then gives rise to universal and natural laws. The universal and natural laws give rise to the phenomenal world, the world into which we as humans are born. We ourselves are part and parcel of that phenomenal world. Yet within the phenomenal world as humans, we have human consciousness. And my daughter last night, we were discussing this as we were watching the movie Contact. If you haven't seen Contact, great movie, Jodie Foster. We were discussing it. And she said, well, what about other animals? And it happened to be the screen on our television had pivoted to the screensaver. And there was a blue whale on the screen. And I happened to look at it and I said, it would even be applicable to the blue whale because the blue whale is a pinch of consciousness. The blue whale in its community has an entire structure by which it lives. Similarly, so for squirrels. So we talked about the universality of this model itself and went from human consciousness to what we refer to as the human derived world, the world that we build, the things that we do. But in addition to that, you have the constructs and the outcomes. So those 7 layers highlight the entirety of existence, irrespective of one's location on the planet, or dare I say, within the universe itself. And so when you understand and have the experience, in this case of transcending or going beyond, to experience the quietude of which we're all made, and understanding that you can't but live your life in a very different fashion, it's all of a sudden that famous quote where Rumi says, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. He's talking about pure consciousness there. He says, I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, transcending, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, languages, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. You begin to recognize the oneness that we all experience. You've heard me give talks before, some of you, of asking the question, where are we? And oftentimes people will say that they're in a specific room or particular city, or they're online in their home. And invariably someone will say, we're in the universe. And I said, absolutely. So the moment we recognize that fundamentally, irrespective of the social constructs to which we give our lives, we are fundamentally, first and foremost, within the universe. And when you begin there and then drill down to the moment, you begin to see all of the constructs that we as humans have created and devised to help give our lives meaning. Irrespective of the construct, it is nonetheless a construct. And in understanding that, the question then becomes, how do you choose to live your life? How do you choose to navigate the world? Do you choose to make a contribution such that when you are no longer encased in this mortal coil, that you then move beyond this space? What have you left behind? How have you become, and in what ways have you made the world a better place? That's what meditation does. Meditation provides us the opportunity to have the expanded perspective, not unlike what we learned from Benjamin Elijah Mays, past president of Morehouse College, where he says the circumference of life cannot be rightly drawn until the center is set. Notice that. The circumference of life, the things around us, cannot be rightly drawn until the center is set. He didn't say they couldn't be drawn. Key word there is rightly drawn. And so as we gain a deeper sense of self, we come to create our center. And in creating that center, that stabilization comes to then serve as our calling card. And with that, we're going to spend our 20 minutes in silence. You are free to turn off your cameras. You are free to sit here. I'll be meditating. All of us will be meditating together. And whatever tradition you follow, feel free to practice that tradition. And I'll bring us out at the 20-minute mark. We will then still sit quietly to come out of our respective traditions and meditation slowly. And then we'll have a Q&A session thereafter. And for those of you who don't practice a particular meditation, feel free to, in this moment, ask yourself, when you recognize that you're first and foremost within the universe, how have I come to be who and what I am? Again, how have I come to be who and what I am? Write down the ideas, the thoughts that surface in your awareness, and then we'll discuss them after. Again, how have I come to be who and what I am? So let us sit comfortably. If your meditative technique refers to closing the eyes, please do so. If it is a form of asanas or breathing technique, please do so. Again, we will all be muted, so you may proceed as you desire. Again, thank you for being here. Let's begin. Is that good for everyone? See some smiles, some nods. See a couple of thumbs up. Good. Very good. Well, meditation, it's one of the gifts that you give to yourself. And something I learned years ago that I had a person pose a question to me of what's the difference between prayer and meditation. And my mind drifted to something I learned from Rumi. And he said that prayer is talking to God, whereas meditation is listening to God. And I thought that was a for me, a very meaningful observation in that when we meditate, we allow the mind to do what it's designed to do. Its thoughts are going to be there because we've had experiences, we've created connections within the brain. Those strengthened connections have come to serve as our default way of being within the world. And so when we sit to meditate, we are allowing ourselves to experience the fullness of the interior landscape. And as it relates to TM, we transcend or go beyond the thoughts. Transcend simply means to go beyond for those who don't practice TM. It simply means to go beyond. And we're going beyond the active level of our mind to experience a quietude that rests just below. So, with that, I'd like to open up for a few minutes of questions and answers. And I'm going to invite Dr. Keshavan back on screen should some of the questions be directed toward him as well. So, any questions, thoughts, reflections from anyone on meditation, on the value that they've experienced with their particular tradition, or any reflections even with the meditation we experienced here as a group? Because I know that meditating in a group can be a very new experience for many people, even across traditions. So please, if not, I do have some questions that people sent to us. And so I'm happy to answer those questions as well for those who will view this at a later date and time. One of the questions that I often get is is meditation easy? And I say, well, you know, meditation is an opportunity to go beyond, allowing our minds to do what they're designed to do. Most often, people will say that their mind is constantly active. And I say, well, just as a light switch has the capacity to be on, it also too has the capacity to be off. And so, in relation to TM, if you can hear what it is that I'm saying, if you can choose to agree or disagree with what it is that I'm saying, choose to act again on what it is that I'm saying, and at the very least, be the age of 10 as a result of brain maturation, you too can practice transcendental meditation. And I think of it in terms of for our children, the walking technique. Once you turn the age of 4, one can learn what's called the walking technique in terms of meditation. And I know that there are other traditions as well that have similar techniques for young people as well. And so everyone can practice a meditation, everyone can benefit from calmness and from clarity. I've said elsewhere that we make our best decisions when we have clarity, yet our worst decisions in lacking clarity. And TM is really a clarity inducing technique. And so, one of the questions another person asks me, what is a consciousness based society? And I go back to that Mays quote. It's a society that centers inner stillness, a society that operates based in ethical clarity and as a foundation really moves in the direction of innovation in every aspect of our lives. Having that clarity and bringing it with us into our day, we come to make much more refined decisions. I often think of it as my dad used to say, and my sister will probably remember this, the open mouth insert foot, that we say or do something only later to realize that it wasn't the best thing to say or do and wish we could have a do-over. And it's in having clarity, knowing what to say in the moment, that we bring our best selves to the fore. I think of it in terms of we learn from Viktor Frankl in his book Man's Search for Meaning. He talks about logotherapy and going from this idea of stimulus and reaction. And I liken that in terms of meditation, and more particularly with TM, we go from stimulus and reaction to stimulus and response. Reacting coming from our primitive brain or amygdala, whereas our response comes from the CEO or the prefrontal cortex of our brain. It allows us to make much better decisions. And the reason that happens because the calmness we experience during meditation is brought with us into our day. And it being brought with us into our day, when we face a potentially stressful situation, there's a momentary pause. And it's in that momentary pause that the population of ideas show themselves. And it's in the showing of those ideas within that moment and acting on it. We set the stage for a much more beneficial outcome. Hence, the phrase of open mouth, insert foot doesn't become our normal way of being. It becomes less of a normal way of being because we've learned to pause. I often say we've learned to get out of the way and to learn to stay out of the way. And it's in staying out of the way and the ideas surfacing and us acting on those ideas, we set the stage for a much more beneficial outcome, not just for ourselves, but also too for those with whom we're navigating whatever the situation may be. But here's a corollary of that. A corollary is that as we do this repeatedly, as this becomes our new norm of pausing and reflecting and then acting, over time, as we accrue these beneficial outcomes, our confidence increases in our ability to do just that, to set the stage for much more beneficial outcomes. Again, not just for ourselves, but too for others as well. But that takes us to pause. By show of hands, how many of us have had an experience where you look back on it and you realize that wasn't the best thing to do and wish you could have a do over? By show of hands. I know I've had those experiences. And it's in having those experiences that we have the capacity as humans to reflect. And it's in that capacity to reflect we can make decisions anew and then act differently. So that's what, those are a couple of questions I wanted to that were posed, and we have so many more, but we don't have time to get to them all. And I may do something else. For those of you who don't know, I do have what's called a Substack, and it's called On Transcendence. So if you go to ontranscendence.org, you pull up my Substack with all of my writings and where this audio will be housed as well. So, Matcheri, are you there? Dr. Keshavan?
Yeah, I'm sitting in a car. No, I'm
Yes.
not driving.
Anyone has any questions for Dr. Keshavan? I'll ask a question. Dr. Keshavan, how did you come to? I know within the West, we have the medical field that has its normal way of being, and you and I've had conversations on consciousness, meditation. How did you pivot as being a medical doctor to moving in the direction of discussing consciousness, meditation, the brain as a neuroscientist? How did you make that pivot and add this to your research? And how did that happen, please?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a question that has a long answer and a short answer. Let me give you somewhere of an intermediate one. Um, I have been interested in the question of what is the self going back to my high school days. Where does consciousness reside? And how do we know who we are and am I and how do I, what's the boundary between me and the rest of the world and so on. So then I went to medical school. I learned anatomy and physiology, and I, dissected the human brain, and I, could not get good answers from these material sciences. And I took up psychiatry and became a psychiatrist and began to work with individual humans. And it became increasingly clear to me that the best way to help people and to help oneself is somehow to try and get rid of that ego.
Mm.
So it became quite an important question for me as to how to understand ways in which we can train our ego to have a more porous boundary, and so that we can begin to see others as a part of ourselves and us in others and so on. So around the same time as when I was interested in high school in the nature of the self, I was also learning some of the ancient scriptures of the Bhagavad Gita and Upanishads and so on. I found that many of those insights about the nature of the self exist already in our ancient scriptures. And then as I began to practice psychiatry, I began to realize that there are tools already, such as yoga, broadly defined, that can help us understand the mind, how it works, and also how to help with many afflictions of the mind, not just by yoga, but in combination with other things like medicines and so on. So, one thing I learned, you kind of alluded to this, Dr. Baruti, just a minute ago, about how meditation helps us to kind of take charge of our system, which is in a reaction mode as opposed to a responsive mode. So, as a neuroscientist, I always think about how what makes us so reactive and what can get us to a more responsive mode. What makes us reactive is that straight reflex path from an idea or a sensation or a thought to an action through the amygdala, the emotion brain regions. So we react emotionally without thinking through. And then there is the CEO of the brain that you alluded to, which is the prefrontal cortex. We hardly use that. What meditation does is it's a tool to help train our prefrontal circuits in order to regulate our default circuits so that we are able to go through life in a reasoning kind of way, driven by reason and less driven by emotion, and get to a point where we move away from having to react emotionally, but to just be able to observe the ripples of the default mode network and be comfortable with it. And that is what meditation and mindfulness are. So it's a process of continuous learning. And I still am a kindergartner when it comes to meditation. So I'm learning from you, Dr. Baruti, and from everyone else. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom, Dr. Keshavan. It's, again, as you know, I enjoy our conversations when we have them. It's always enlightening for me. And I know that this time has begun to come to a close. But before I close, I want to first thank Dr. Keshavan for agreeing to be our guest speaker today. I'd like to thank my sister Zendra for the inspirational nudge to move in this direction, to offer this on a quarterly basis that we call, again, What the World Needs Now, International Meditation Hour. So I want to thank her for both her presence today and for the inspirational nudge. And I also like to thank those who couldn't be here today for the words of inspiration along the way, both in text and phone calls and emails, that they wouldn't be able to be here, but that offer their support as well. So I want to thank you for that. And with that, I will close by simply saying thank you for bringing your presence to this hour. And again, thank you, Dr. Keshavan, for your insights. As you know, I always learn from you, and I'm sure others will benefit from your knowledge as well. After we're done, we'll send a short reflection prompt that you'll receive in your email. And we'll have the next International Meditation Hour on 1 January 2026 at 1 p.m. That, again, will be every quarter, typically the first day of a quarter, that it will be made available. And I also am placing within the chat the link to my Substack is ontranscendence.org. And if you even type in baruti.substack.com, it takes you directly to this link, and that has my writings there. It'll also have the audio of this as well, which I'll be editing down over the next couple of days to edit and provide it for those who weren't able to be here today for them to listen to at leisure. Again, thank you for being here. Thank you for helping to bring this conversation with my sister, Zendra. To think that in terms of the mind being so powerful, that you can envision something. And if you're willing to do the necessary work to bring it to fore, you can do so. This is evidence of that process of, in a conversation one afternoon, coming up with an idea and then basically beating myself up when it came to developing the website, meditationhour.org, to develop the website to be able to put this out into the world as an offering. And it goes back to an essay that I wrote discussing Bryce Courtney's book, The Power of One, which you can find on the Substack as well. And it's an opportunity to show everyone who's willing to listen that you have more power than you may think. Your brain is the most powerful thing you will ever encounter in your life. Why do I say that with such conviction? Because everything we as humans devised began as an idea in someone's mind. Everything. So that which gave rise to the thing has to then be more powerful than the thing itself. And that power rests within you. You have a brain, you have the capacities. So, whichever tradition you practice in terms of your meditation, I will encourage you to regularly practice that meditation. And if you don't have a particular tradition and you happen to be in the metropolitan Boston area, feel free to reach out to me and we can discuss transcendental meditation. If you happen to be in a different region, reach out to a local meditation center and ask them about meditative techniques. But whatever you do, add meditation to your daily routine and your life will be the better for it. Again, thank you, Dr. Keshavan, for being here. Thank you, Zendra, for the inspirational nudge. And I thank each of you for being here today. Thank you.